last pages of War and Peace. War and Peace. Wow. I can't believe it. I can't believe I finished this book. I honestly didn't think that I would. I started this book because I was feeling incredibly exhausted, I suppose. I was really down and I was really hard on myself about my productivity and just really in my own head. And so I remember saying to Tom that if I can't do anything, I'm going to read War and Peace. And I'm going to finish it, and it is going to be an accomplishment that I can check off. But most importantly, it's going to be about the journey. And I did it. I checked off a major life goal. I have so many thoughts and so many things I want to talk about with this book, and I fear that I will just not be as eloquent as I want to be. I just wrote out some pros and cons and some overall thoughts about this book that I have. I, first and foremost, am giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know if that's surprising to anyone, but 5 out of 5. I truly think I will read this book again in my life. I really do feel that. Now that I've read it, I want to read it again, and I was not expecting that. Truly, I thought that I was going to read it and maybe get 200 pages in and think, not quite for me, and move on with it. But I finished it, and I am so happy about that. So 5 out of 5 stars. I'm probably going to read it again. Maybe I'll try to read a different translation at some point. I think that would be really interesting, but this translation I thought was fantastic. It was absolutely beautiful and beautiful prose, so highly recommend this specific translation. Some of the downsides of this book, and surprise, surprise, I don't think that they are going to be unique in any stretch. I think you Google reviews of War and Peace and you'll probably find some people say what I'm about to say, which is that there are a number of long-winded, repetitive passages on historiography and how to study history and what Tolstoy's viewpoint on how we should view history is. And while I completely agree with him and think he is 100% right, and also wonder if he was one of the first people to talk about history in this way, I don't know that he was, but I'm just throwing that out there. I do think it was nuanced for the time. They're long-winded and they're repetitive, and he repeats himself a lot. And whenever you get to a chunk of him taking you out of the narrative of the story and out of the world of the characters and into essay mode, and he lays out his arguments, you kind of have to be like, okay, I'm gonna be here for a few pages, and Again, while I agree with you, you've said this before, and he tends to show you the story. He'll tell you what he's trying to tell you through the characters, and it's brilliant and it's beautiful and it's moving, and then he will repeat himself and he will say, okay, now what did we learn? I really did enjoy his writing, so I didn't mind reading them, truly. Like, I read every single word in this book. I did not skip through anything, but I do feel like after a while, you know, and the epilogue ends in a very similar fashion, where the first part is a wrap-up of the characters, and I was laughing out loud and I was crying and I was feeling all the feels, and then the second half is Tolstoy stepping back and saying, okay, this is what I really wanted to say. One thing that I really want to call out, which I think is really appropriate for this book, is in the appendix. Tolstoy writes, "What is War and Peace? It is not a novel, less still an epic poem, still less a historical chronicle. War and Peace is what the author wanted and was able to express in the form in which it is expressed." I feel like that is a perfect summary of War and Peace. It is not quite an essay, not quite a novel. It is an epic in a very original form. And so do not let the long-winded essays on historiography deter you from reading this book, because they really are fantastic, and it is an example of fantastic writing. Another con that I don't know if it's a con, but I just don't know how I feel about it, is how Tolstoy writes women. Now, one thing I know for sure is that Tolstoy's wife had a really big hand in the completion of this novel, and she deserves a lot of credit for the work that she did on this. But that being said, I don't know how I feel about Tolstoy's view of women. I'm saying that because I genuinely don't know. I forgive the time period and forgive the world in which he was a part of, and so I don't forgive the time period. I forgive his thoughts because of the time period. But I don't know. I don't know what his overall message of womanhood was in this book, and it is causing me to pause a little bit, because he writes such fantastic, beautiful characters, and I fell in love with all of them, man or woman, but I don't know what he was trying to tell me about what a good woman is and means. And if I think he was telling me what he was trying to tell me, I kind of have to roll my eyes a little bit, but still a fantastic book. And finally, my last con, I think, would be Tolstoy's focus on fatalism. I'm not a fatalist, really. Sometimes I am, sometimes I am not. I'm very agnostic in that sense, and I feel like he is very focused on fatalism, and he really believes in fatalism, and he spends this entire book arguing about fatalism. There were times when he was talking about history, and he was talking about historical choices and why history happens. It felt like the argument was convenient. But that doesn't mean that the argument is wrong. It just is convenient. So I don't know, again, how I necessarily feel about it, but I do know that sometimes when he was talking about fate in a grand sense, and when he was saying some unknowable force was moving them and things like that, I just felt myself going, oh, okay. I guess so. Like, he's not wrong. I just felt like there was such a focus on it, and I am not 100% a believer, so I felt like it lost me a little bit. But that doesn't mean, again, that it was wrong. I don't know why I'm being so worried about offending Tolstoy. This book is a masterpiece, and these cons are very small in comparison to all of the pros that I felt about this book. Let us get into them. So first and foremost, I do completely agree with Tolstoy's view on historiography and how history should be studied, and how we should talk about history in a more nuanced, complex way than just the simple narrative of great men doing great things. I think that his viewpoint makes total sense, and as someone who absolutely loves history and the study of history, not just history, but the study of history, I really truly enjoyed this, and now I want to know, was his viewpoint one of the first that wrote about this? Again, I doubt that is the case, and I feel like Tolstoy would probably scold me for trying to think that, because it fits in a little bit more to the narrative of great men doing great things. I just thought it was really fantastic. And I knew nothing about this history going into it. I intentionally did that. I knew nothing about the war between Napoleon and France. Frankly, I actually know very little about Napoleon himself. I am much more of a 20th century history girl. I love World War I, and I know quite a bit about World War II. But Napoleon's wars, knew very little about. So the fact that I went in completely unknowing about this history and came out with a full understanding, because you get a full understanding of the history, is fantastic. And not only that, I feel like I found it in a bit of a nuanced way. One thing that I found really interesting was the fact that Alexander and Napoleon were characters, but they were also characters alongside other characters. And I thought that Tolstoy does a fantastic job of fleshing out his arguments within the plot and within the narrative. I think people always say that you could take out the war parts of this book and it would be a fantastic novel in and of itself. And it's very true, because Napoleon and Alexander are just characters among a cast of characters, and their choices are just like the other characters, and it really humanizes them in a way I feel like you maybe wouldn't necessarily get from a traditional history book. I also have to give a big pro to the characters. I knew going in that I was going to love Pierre, and I knew going in that Pierre was going to end up being one of my favorite characters of all time. And that is absolutely true. But what I didn't expect was to fall in love with so many of the other characters. I wasn't expecting to read such three-dimensional characters. I really wasn't. I was expecting to read very base level, good, bad, this person thinks that, this person thinks that. But these characters felt incredibly real, and their journeys really spoke to me on many different levels. You know, I found myself in moments with Prince Andre when he's looking at the oak tree and saying life doesn't end at 31, and he decides he's going to live his life a certain way, but then something comes along and changes his mindset. I found myself in Pierre being a seeker and endlessly searching for answers and trying to make the best choices of your life for your life and for the lives of others around you. And I found myself in Natasha with passion and the want to enjoy life and her caring for others and her love of others and her love of her family. And I wasn't expecting to love Nikolai and Maria as much as I did. I loved Maria from the beginning, and I loved her in the television show, so I'm not surprised. But Maria really was a character that I felt so deeply connected to, and not necessarily because I saw myself in her, but because she reminded me of people that I love who are just so good and so good for this world. And I felt her pain throughout the story in a way that's just, it was beautiful. And Nikolai with his selfishness at the beginning, and the fact that his character again didn't go on this two-dimensional journey where he was bad and then he turned good. There was nuance within all of these characters that made them feel so real. And as you could see, I could go on forever about these characters and the way that Tolstoy wrote them, and I just have to say fantastic. I absolutely loved it, and I cannot wait to dive back into this world, believe it or not. There's a very famous quote, and I don't know who said it, but I'll put it up if I can find it, that says, "If life could write, it would write like Tolstoy." I completely see that now. I think probably the biggest pro out of all of this, out of the characters and the story and the idea of historiography, is Tolstoy's writing. It's the reason why I could read long-winded passages about history and why he could take me out of the plot and I would be okay with it, because his writing is fantastic. I like it to be clear. I don't want to feel like the writer is writing at me. I want to feel like the writer is telling me a story. And with Tolstoy, I just don't know of any other writer who has made me feel like they understand life in a way that I understand life. And that's a really big statement, but I think it's true with Tolstoy. And I really just loved this book. I don't know if you can tell, but it's so true. I mean, I can't believe that I was reading this and I agreed so much with a man who lived in the 1800s. It was fascinating. This was so many things to me. It was a life goal. It was just a book I was reading. It was my first Tolstoy work. It was another classic to check off my shelves and say that I've read. And it was an experience that I'm so grateful that I had. And I am so glad that I picked it up, and whatever force compelled me to do that, I thank you, because this was terrific and I'm really looking forward to diving into more of his work. If you've read it or if you're going to read it, let me know down below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because I clearly have so many, and it's fantastic. So, what is next? I feel like I just went through a breakup or something. Like, I don't know what to do with myself now. I am not gonna dye my hair or cut it, but I am probably gonna pick up another book. I had a very crazy work week, and all I want to do this weekend is sit and read. So I went through my bookshelves and was looking at my TBR and looking at certain books that I have on my shelf, and I picked out 2 that I'm gonna try to get through this weekend. I am admittedly a very slow reader, so I don't know if I'll be able to, but I should be able to at least finish one of them because it's pretty short. The first one that I think I'm going to read next, and then I'm probably going to sit down and continue reading, is Nothing But Blackened Teeth. This looks terrifying. I'm so excited to dive into it. Seems like it's a traditional haunted house horror story set in Japan, and it's a group of friends go to a traditional home and spend the weekend there, and things go crazy. I don't know if you can hear that banging outside, but I felt like it was very on point to my description. So I think I'm gonna read this one and see how I feel about it. And when I finish, I will let you know, and we will move on to the next book. I can't believe it. I can't believe I read Tolstoy. I feel like every book I'm gonna read now, I'm gonna compare to Tolstoy and be like, oh. Finished it, and it was a really quick read. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about this book. I really liked the beginning. I liked the setup. I liked how it was a very traditional horror story in terms of the way things escalated and the characters and certain tropes. It was really well done in that regard. I felt like the only downside for me was that it was just a little short and the ending felt really abrupt. But other than that, I really did enjoy it. I'd probably give this about a 3 out of 5 stars. I got a little bit of the Haunting of Hill House vibes with this in terms of the cast of characters and what happens to them and how the house kind of feeds upon them. It kind of was like, this is the story and that's it. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it was kind of perfect in what I was looking for today, but I do think that I could have used a little bit more of a build-up and tension and a little bit more of a reward in that sense. It's really hard to talk about books without spoiling them, but if you really like horror, if you like good writing, I would highly recommend this book. Now that I've completed 2 books today, I am going to go for a nice long walk. It is super sunny out and I need to get some fresh air because I'm going a little stir crazy. So that's what we're gonna do, and then when we get back, I'm gonna pick up this book. And I'm gonna start reading. I love books. On page 150 of this book, and I have to say I'm loving it. I feel like I have been raving a lot about books today, but I have just been really lucky lately with some really solid reads, and this is no exception. I love the original Frankenstein, and so I was going into this story with very high expectations of a retelling, but I feel like Kiersten White, the author, really did it justice, and this is really an example of a way to do a retelling well. I often have a really hard time reading books where you don't really like the main character or you're not really rooting for them because they are awful. And there is something about Elizabeth Frankenstein that is deeply unsettling and not quite right, and she's not an ultra good character, but I find myself still rooting for her and still really enjoying being in her mind and seeing her actions. I feel like that is a testament to the writing, and it also feels very close to the original text, where when you're reading the original Frankenstein, you're both rooting for and disgusted by Dr. Frankenstein's actions, and Kiersten White did an exceptional job and is doing an exceptional job so far with the nuanced parts of the story. Not everyone is 100% good in this story, and not everyone is 100% bad, and it makes for a very, very good story. I'm really enjoying it. It is barreling towards a 4 out of 5 stars, but we will continue to read tonight, and I will probably finish it tonight. And I realized that I actually have another one of her books on my shelves, called And I Darken, and I'm probably going to pick that up and start reading it this week because her writing is fantastic, and I did not expect to enjoy a Frankenstein retelling as much as this. But right now, my eyes are very dry and tired, and I'm very hungry, so it is time for some dinner. And I think I'm gonna make some curry noodle bowls with lots of veggies, and then I'm gonna keep reading. It has been exactly 12 hours since I started reading today, and I just finished the third book today. It is serendipitous that I finished this book at 9 p.m. because I started reading at 9 a.m. So it has been 12 hours pretty much straight of reading, except for a couple hours of a walk and dinner. And I read a lot of really great books today. I don't know how I feel about this book. I loved the beginning. I loved the first half of this book. And then, admittedly, the plot kind of lost me a little bit. I found that the main character really figured out things super quickly, and things started to happen that almost made me feel like the author was rushing through the plot a little bit. I found that things wrapped up a little too neatly in the end, and that kind of slow build that we had at the beginning was flipped towards the end of the book. I still think I'd give it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm still going to read And I Darken next. I really loved White's writing, and I really did love the characters, and I kind of realized partway through the parallels to Mary Shelley's life that she was drawing. It was just really great. It was a really great read. I'm really happy that I read this, and I do think that it sits very comfortably between 3 and a 4 out of 5 stars. Probably a 4 out of 5 stars. That is my day of reading. We've got Tolstoy, we've got Nothing But Blackened Teeth, a really good horror story, and now I'm very, very tired, and I think I'm probably gonna curl up in a super hot bath and just close my eyes because my eyes have been working non-stop, and just spend the rest of the night relaxing. I can't believe I was able to finish 2 books today from start to finish, and that I finished Tolstoy. It was a really great day of reading, and I'm so happy about it. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you read any of these books, let me know what you think. If you have read Anna Karenina by Tolstoy, also let me know what you think, because I think that might be my next big book that I take on. We'll see. Good night.